podcast world, fellow horticulturists, lovers of plants, gardeners, family, and friends. Welcome to Shrubby Buddies, the podcast, friends with woodies for garden goodies. I'm host Matt Guthrie.
And I'm host Tim Fleischer, coming at you from Central Ohio, Zone 6B. We're just a couple of public horticulturists and certified arborists with experience in education, landscape design, gardening, retail, and wholesale.
So grab a drink, polish your pruners, dust off that kneeling pad, and let's get down to business. Hey, Shrubby Buddies, and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. I am Matthew C. Guthrie the First, joined with old Timmy Tulips Fleischer. Tim, how are you today, buddy?
Good, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
Yeah. Why are you looking at me like that?
It's a special day.
Why is that?
Well, because 1 year ago to the day was our total solar eclipse.
It was.
Yeah.
Total solar eclipse. We saw flocks of bald eagles
Flying upside down.
and
Yeah, the eclipse made all the birds fly upside down.
Yeah, that was a really cool celestial event.
Mm-hmm.
One that I will never forget.
Never
personally.
forget.
So
Yeah. And also 1 year ago today, you turned 41.
Yeah. And today I turned 42.
Which means it's your birthday.
Yeah. You really wanted to hit that button.
I did, but I forgot if it was going to be the other one, so I'm glad I picked the right one.
You picked the right one.
So happy birthday to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
How's it feeling?
About the same as it did yesterday.
Sure.
And probably the same as it will tomorrow.
But you took a little me day, didn't you?
I took the day off just to kind of do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So part of that was, to do nothing, to just kind of relax my birthday at home, just me and the dogs. This weekend, I didn't get a chance to do a lot around the house because I started back at the greenhouse. So I'm working back at Dutch Mill this spring and summer and into the fall. And, Saturdays and Sundays, just killing it in there, working retail with all of the fine folks at Dutch Mill Greenhouse. So that started this past weekend, and I just use it as an opportunity to come to kind of chill today, and did a little cleaning, did a little yard work, even though it was kind of chilly out. But yeah.
Yeah, I saw your grass is freshly mowed.
Yes.
We have windows now, so I can look out and say that and see it.
First mow of the year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Your sink's empty, your vacuum cleaner's out. It looks like you were busy today.
I was busy today.
That's good.
I got some relaxation in there too.
Good.
So watched the final episode of The White Lotus.
Mm.
It was good.
Yeah, no spoilers.
Watched a couple episodes of The Righteous Gemstones.
Man.
Yeah.
I was at work.
I know you were.
So, but that's, I envy you, but
yeah.
Yeah, so you were missed today at work, but happy birthday nonetheless.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to be recording on your birthday. We're recording on a Tuesday because we had a little busy weekend as far as pretty much Matt's issue, not mine for a change.
Yeah, it was. It was work and then birthday celebrations for me, Taylor, my niece, her boyfriend. We all have April birthdays, so we got together Sunday afternoon for that. But yeah.
Good. Well, that's okay. Amelia had a soccer tournament this weekend, so at least we didn't have too much going on with having to add the podcast in. So just watch some soccer in the rain.
Good stuff.
So, but here we are. We're in a cold snap right now. I think we're going to be getting up out of it in the next day or two, but it's going to be another cold night.
Yeah, it went from 4 inches of rain to really cold.
Yeah, it went from like warm to lots of rain to really frigid.
Yeah, I'm looking at my computer right now, and there's a freeze warning issued.
Yeah.
So here we are, folks.
Yeah.
April in Zone 6B.
Yeah, we're talking about like mid-20s in 6B, but that's okay. I mean, that's normal.
It is normal.
This is perfectly normal.
This
so
is April. Nobody
worry too much. If we're getting freeze warnings and it's mid-May, then I'd be worrying a little bit. But right now, this always happens.
Mm-hmm.
No worries. Your perennials are going to be just fine. They're the things that are hardy to your zone are adapted to these erratic temperatures.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that are that are going to be fine, but there's some things that have flowered, but
Yeah,
that,
well,
that
you
are
know,
gonna
there
get
might
zapped, but
they might get zapped, but they'll leaf back out and everything
Yeah.
will be good, right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
So
all right.
what else? Anything else this week going on? I mean, we had seasonal staff start back at work for us. I started back at the greenhouse, soccer tournaments, birthdays, first mow of the year. Yeah,
That first mow's good. Did you bag or did you mulch?
mulched.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah. So yeah.
I don't know why I said good for you, but I'm glad because it's just more work to bag anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
Anything else going on with you?
No, man, I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
Yep, just pretty, just running the mill, just getting ready for the springtime.
Another day, another dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So
living the dream.
So speaking of blooms and everything's going to be okay, I guess we could use that to just roll us into our next segment. Stigma anther pollen style. What's a bloomin' crocodile?
Woo.
Yeah.
Once we get video on this, you guys are going to like that.
Yeah, because we'll do little dances
bouncing
with it.
around. That's just so catchy. I love that. So yeah, it's our sophomore episode with our bloom segment. And again, just like last week, we're going to have a lot of things on this list, so we'll just roll through them pretty quick. But I want to just start and get these nasties out of the way, but I think it's important, Matt and I were talking, to mention the things that are invasive that are also blooming because you see them too, and just to be aware of them. So the 3 things I've got on the list today that's invasive that's blooming are the calorie pears. Here they're just lining the freeways, and they're pretty, I'll admit it, but they are just terrible. Another episode, we'll get into that, but they are just the worst. Another invasive that I noticed blooming just today is Vinca minor, which is a ground cover that still seems pretty popular, but there's so many better options. Again, we'll get into that in another episode. And the other invasive, which isn't quite the problem it is for us as it is in the Northeast, is the Norway maples. They're blooming right now, and I won't plant them. No, I don't think you should, but in the Northeast, where there's the huge sugar maple forest, these things are just wrecking them. So keep those in mind. Back now to the good stuff. It was a great year for the early blooming magnolias. We talked about those quite a bit last week. They are now toast.
Yeah.
Just today, I noticed I was like, I gotta get a picture of some of those because I haven't photographed any this year. And as I was driving, I was like, nope, there's no more charm left in them. All the flowers are like this weird pinky brown, and they're all droopy. So the frost got them, but I think they had a better year than usual, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think it was I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate that the really cool snapper toasted them.
Yeah, but they lasted longer than...
They did. Yeah, they were killer.
Sure. A couple of bulbs I've seen since last week. We mentioned daffodils last week, but the hyacinths are going crazy. Beautiful smell on those. And the tulips are just beginning to bloom. I've noticed them all around. And then when I got to your house today, I noticed that your tulips are not quite open, but the color is just striking. You can see that. And then as far as trees goes, serviceberry, redbud, cherries, sugar maples, which can really be appreciated if you can find some lower branches. They're really beautiful, like neon yellow flowers that are very pendulous. Excuse me. And the last tree is peaches. Peaches are prunus, so they're related to cherries, but they have a beautiful, very similar to a cherry-like bloom, bright pink. And then on to perennials.
The apricot trees up at Tonoster Brewing.
They're prunus too. They're prunus too, right?
Yeah.
They're related to the peaches because they've got the one seed in the middle of the pit, if you will.
I will.
I love a good apricot.
Yeah. We need to get up there and have some apricots, some Abrahams, and some pluots.
Yeah, we do. And I'll tell this story, and I don't know if I told this before, but my dad had an apricot tree right by our house. And it got some disease when I was a kid, and he cut it down. But he left, there was this, sucker coming out of, not the ground, but, the base of the tree, and he left it, and it was just this really slender, 3-foot branch. And I was like, Dan, Dad cut that tree down, but forgot that little piece there, and I just chopped it off. And he was like, he came back later. He's like, did you do that? And I was like, yeah, can't believe you forgot to cut that. And yeah, I mean, he wasn't like, I'm so mad, but he was just like, oh, okay, well,
there's that.
There goes the apricot tree for good. Yeah, delicious fruit. Let's see. The flowering quince, nice red flower. So it's kind of like a flower that we're not seeing. That one jumps out at you. Primula, I noticed, is blooming at Megan's work at Inniswood. Iberis is a white ground covery type perennial that's blooming right now, and a couple good shade perennials that are blooming right now are Pulmonaria, lungwort, and the epimediums, aka Randy beefgrass, aka horny goatweed.
Love it.
Say it again. Randy beefgrass.
Eat your Randy beefgrass.
Me so horny goatweed.
T-shirts in the making.
Yeah, so that pretty much covers what we've seen blooming out there. If you've seen some extra things blooming, please let us know.
Please do.
Tell us. Do tell.
Yeah, that's cool. So keep your eyes peeled for all of the mentioned above for what's in bloom right now. So cool. So on to our main talk. So today we want to talk about garden centers and kind of shopping in garden centers. It's something that we're all going to be doing here as spring comes upon us. So spending a little time in the garden center, just kind of things to be on the lookout in garden centers, how to shop for plants, what to look for in plants. But before that, I want to hit real quick, on vegetables. Okay. Just real quick. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this right now. This could be a whole episode of its own, but seed starting. If you're starting seeds indoors, have a plan for what it is that you're going to be starting and, what you want to have in your garden. When you start them indoors, you need to have grow lights on them. A windowsill is not going to cut it. Good grow lights, get those things right down on the soil. When the seeds germinate, bring those lamps up ever so slightly. You don't want them way above the plants, or the plants will get stretched out and leggy. You want those plants to be short and stout. So keep that grow light real down, real close to them, down on them. Keeping them moist, but not overwatered, and then I know there was some stuff that you had talked about, that can just be direct sown right now. And, now would be a good time to do it. So I don't know if you want to hit on some of those things real quick.
Yes, I know it's really fun to think about starting your own seeds, and it works great for something like a tomato or a pepper that's not cold hardy, that you're not going to want to plant in your garden till, for us, like early May. But there's a lot of stuff that can be planted straight directly into your garden right now. In fact, I did mine 2 weeks ago. I did my first sow in my garden because the seedlings can take these cold snaps. And so, this stuff I wouldn't start inside. Why, skip that part and just go straight to the ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those types of plants are, there's a lot of leafy greens you can do, like kale and lettuce and chard and collards. Most of the root vegetables can be direct sown right, like 2 weeks ago or right now. So radishes, turnips, beets, carrots, and then peas, sugar snaps, snow peas, just regular old garden peas. They can all be direct sown in the cold weather. And then you can plant your onion sets now. You can plant onion seeds if you're into that, leeks. And then kind of along the same lines as garlic, but that should have been planted last fall for a harvest later this season.
What about potatoes?
Yeah, I think you want to wait a little longer on potatoes, but I think you could probably get away with it.
Okay. And
the thing about potatoes is, like, you buy a big sack of potatoes for a pretty cheap price, so it's a good thing to tinker with. Like, what works for you? What if you don't have another cold snap? Then you're good to go. So tinker with them a little bit.
Sure.
Tinker. But yeah, those are all things that you should be, like, peas and radishes. You should be able to get like a good harvest of that before you even get your tomatoes and peppers in the ground, right? And then you'll clear those plants out, get new plants in, and then a lot of that stuff I just mentioned can be sown again late summer for a fall harvest.
Yeah.
So you can get 2 rounds of this stuff. So
little double dip.
And that stuff doesn't like the heat. So it's not like you don't want to be planting this stuff late spring because then it's not going to do well in the summer.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Cool, man.
Very good.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate that.
But yeah, onto the garden center stuff, picking out plants at garden centers. We thought this was appropriate now because kind of from now to up through Mother's Day, garden centers are just...
Yeah, for us, it's like now through first week of June, probably,
Yeah.
So the whole month of May, May 1 to the end of May, it's just slamming.
It's crazy.
But now that we're open, we have people coming in. We have people talking, shopping, looking around and stuff. So this is just kind of an episode on people that spend time in the garden centers, or maybe you have never been to a garden center before, but you want to spend more time in the garden center. This episode is for you. So, where do you want to start with this?
If you do want to spend more time in a garden center, you're also going to take a toll on your pocketbook, if you will.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But that's all in the fun of it.
That is all in the fun of it. So garden centers, we'll just hit on perennials real quick, or we'll spend a little bit of time on perennials. But when you're in there shopping for perennials for your perennial border or your perennial garden, just some things to look at, things to think about. Full plants. So you don't want some little dinky plant. Now most of these retailers should be selling stuff that's full and has a nice, plant above the soil. But
as the consumer, though, I say, if they have a whole table of the same thing, look through it. Pick the best looking ones. Why not? Don't just pick the ones that are closest to you. So look for those really full plants, pick them up, look at them, inspect them, pick the full ones.
Lots of flower buds. Maybe you have an event coming up that you're trying to make your garden look like A+ for. So maybe you want to look for something that is in full flower and doesn't have the flower buds that are going to be coming on.
I saw a lot of that when I worked at the garden center, was people wanting to spruce things up real quick for their graduation party or something.
Yeah.
So, you're recommending that stuff that's blooming right then and there.
Yep.
But if you're looking for more of a long-term, beauty, don't buy the stuff that's already in bloom. Try to buy stuff that's just packed with flower buds, so it has time to adjust once you plant it, and then you'll see the blooms.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I like to do.
So lots of flower buds, nice full crown of the plant, nice healthy. Check for pests while you're in there. Look for aphids, look for thrips, things like that. And
usually not an issue in garden centers, but it can be. Infested stock can come and it can be missed, and it's usually like turning over the leaves or looking down by the stems. They're not going to be big, but if you see anything that's just creepy crawly and there's in large numbers, probably not good to take that
stay
home.
away from that one for sure. But just as important as the plant that's up top, checking for pests, picking out a nice full plant with good flowers or with lots of flower blooms, is you want something that's going to be rooted in good. So all of this stuff as it gets sold from a grower to the retailer should have good, healthy roots on it, even if you're growing it. We grow a lot of our own perennials at Dutch Mill, but before any of that stuff gets put out on the shelf, we're flipping those plants over and sliding the pots off the bottoms and checking roots. I do that in garden centers. Even in wholesale nurseries, I'll do that. Pull the plant out of the pot to check for the roots. So don't be afraid to do that. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, but you want to make sure that the plant has good roots, just ask somebody to help you. Like, hey, is there any way you can pull this plant out of the pot to see if it has good roots? Because the roots are what's most important about that plant.
I was just going to say, I contend that the most important thing, if you're buying perennials, which is something you're going to want to come back year and year, is to buy something with healthy ass roots.
Yeah. So, so often we look at stuff and it's like, oh, I don't care really how it looks on top, maybe, but if it's got a really good root system in it out of the pot, like maybe it got missed over a weekend of watering and like some of the foliage just turned crispy. that's fine. I know that plant's going to be fine. I can cut it back, put it in the ground, water it. If it's got good roots, it's gonna be okay. A plant without a good root structure, real good root systems, probably not going to be okay.
Yeah, if you pull a plant out of a pot and it kind of comes out in a clump and then there's all this extra soil just left in the bottom of the pot, that means it's not rooted in well, and I wouldn't go buying that plant.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. So you made a note right here, and I can't quite remember what that note was about, but
well, there was the sizes too. The note is be observant. What I remember working in the garden center in the perennial section is I would always watch where the hummingbirds would go, because if you think about it, a garden center is just like a playground for pollinators. Mm-hmm. So I would watch these hummingbirds just come in and visit the same things over and over. And I would think, well, if you want hummingbirds in your garden at home, then buy whatever that hummingbird is eating on, right?
Yeah, what you eat now.
Don't guess, just look what you see. And I know a big one that I remember from working at the garden center was David phlox.
Okay.
It's a pure white phlox, and the hummingbirds were just on it like flies on shit. Okay. And that's how I love that plant, and that's why I like it, because I know that that will at least get me hummingbirds if I can keep the deer away from it.
Or if you are wanting to do a pollinator garden, what's got the bees on it and the flies on it at the garden center?
Precisely.
For sure. Or butterflies, whatever it may be. Yeah. Keep your eyes peeled. So be observant. And then, I'm sorry, I skipped right over that. Compare sizes, best bang for the buck. So, are you just doing one of something? Maybe just a gallon's fine. Are you wanting to do a large mass planting of something, or a large grouping of something? Maybe a quart size perennial is the way to go. So look at sizes, look at prices, and then kind of compare the actual size of the plant, because a lot of times, whether it be perennial, shrub, tree, say in a shrub, like a 2-gallon pot and a 3-gallon is going to save you a few dollars if you go with the 2. And a lot of times the plant's very similar in size.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and we're talking perennials, so these things are going to just continue to grow and come back each year. So if you're on a little bit of a budget and you can buy 3 quart-size heucheras for the price of 1-gallon-size heuchera, well, buy the 3.
Yep.
And plant them in a little grouping. It's just...
Yeah, and something to think about with that is the difference between a quart and a gallon a lot of times is only a handful of weeks,
Yeah.
So a lot of times these things are actually started the same year, just some are started earlier in the wholesale growing process, I suppose. So cool. Anything else you want to hit on with perennials, what to look for?
That covers it, but if you have any more questions about picking out perennials, that's something that I get real jazzed up about, because I love looking at plant stock and, picking that stuff out, because, as horticulturists, there's an art to it, and that's the paint or the clay, that we want to make sure that stuff looks good, because we're going to put that together in a mosaic. And, am I getting a little too deep there?
No, I love it.
But I
feel like I've used that analogy before.
For sure.
Maybe not on this, but in life. Yeah. So cool. So trees, we'll do trees and shrubs. We'll talk about kind of tree and shrub. That's a tongue twister for me.
Tree and shrub
selection. So
specifically trees.
Now, what people need to realize is that with trees, you need to be like overcritical on trees. They're an investment. You want to plant these things. You want them to live a long time. You're going to be investing some money into them. It's not like a perennial where you're going to go out and it's like you spend 15 or 20 bucks on a perennial, you put it in the ground. If it dies the next year, it's like, okay, that sucks, but I'm out 15 or 20 bucks. With the tree, you're dropping $150, $200, $250 or more on a tree, and it's like, okay, I want this thing to live. I want it to add shade or ornamental value to the property. I want it to add actual value to the property. Like financial value. So
yeah, and I'll just say, I was at the garden center yesterday, and you spend more time in a garden center because you work at one.
Yep. Dutch Mill Greenhouse.
At work, we don't spend a whole lot of time in the garden center because we shop wholesale.
Mm-hmm.
So we get different pricing. But they had all these red buds lined up out front of the garden center, and they were just gorgeous. And curious, what are these going for? Like, what's someone going to pay for this? And they were $190, and they were in like, I don't know, I think it's probably like a 7-gallon pot. They weren't very big. I mean, once that thing's in the ground, I'm going to be taller than it. You know, it wasn't a very tall tree either. And I was like, so that's an investment.
It is an investment.
If you're spending $190 on a redbud tree, you better make sure you pick the right one out of what they have.
Yeah. And when picking the right tree, we talk about being overcritical. So you need to check that thing from top to bottom.
Yeah, give it a good physical.
Yeah, you're checking the trunk for wounds, whether that be wounds from deer where it was growing or mechanical damage from it being loaded on or off of a trailer to get from point A to point, to the retailer.
Yeah, or just some ratty kid in the garden center coming up to it with his toy truck and rubbing it all over the bark and scraping it off.
Look for, I don't know, diseases or any kind of rot that may be on the tree. Dead branches, things like that. So, and a lot of that also goes with shrubs, but we're talking trees here.
Yeah, check the branches for stability because it might have been a recently broken branch, so everything looks good on the leaf end of things, but it might have been recently broken, and you don't want that. That's one less branch.
Yeah.
You're paying for that branch, and it is now dead.
It's a goner.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so really, really be diligent about that. And you want to check as you work your way from the top of the tree down the tree, and you're checking for all of this stuff, if it's a single stem tree, like one singular trunk, make sure it's nice and straight. It's not crooked. If it's a tree that needs like a dominant leader, check to make sure that it's got that dominant leader.
And when Matt says dominant leader, we'll just back up there. When you look towards the top of the tree, make sure if it's a tree that grows up, straight and tall, that there's one branch at the top that's kind of taller than the rest, and it just really seems like it's in charge. Because with the way that the hormones work in the tree, that's very important for proper tree growth.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so single stem, looking for a straight trunk. And as you work your way down the trunk, right at the top of the soil there, you want to look for the root flare, the trunk flare, which Google it if you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, because really, I think at some point, maybe this summer, we could do a whole episode on tree selection and planting.
Absolutely, we could.
And talking more about the root flare, the trunk flare, and not the graft union. But you want to make sure that root flare, that trunk flare is there. It's not too deep in the soil. Often these things get thrown in a bucket and soil just gets dumped over top of the flare, but you want to find that root flare. And you want to make sure that there aren't any visible like girdling roots. Now in potted trees, you're probably not going to see this as much as you would in field dug bottom burlap trees.
You're not going to see anything like that until you go to plant it. And so again, that's a whole nother episode. But if you clearly see roots coming up out of the soil and wrapping around the trunk, no go.
Yeah, stay away from that. So you want to kind of check for those girdling roots.
And as far as that flare Matt's talking about, where the tree gets wider real quick right at the base, if you think about trees that you see maybe in nature where that is very common, that's how the tree needs to grow. If that flare isn't exposed, the tree's not going to make it, and it's just not going to grow well. A tree should not look like a telephone pole coming right out of the ground. You need to have that flare. So if you don't see it at the gardens, it's there. If you don't see it, you just, when it comes to planting time, again, which is another episode, you might have to take some of that soil out to expose that flare.
Yeah, for sure.
So
those are some of the things you want to look for. Like we said, the girdling roots, root flare, trunk flare. Now, checking for roots on a tree is difficult. Obviously, you can't just pull a tree out of the pot like you can a 1-gallon perennial or a quart perennial. But sometimes you can kind of look and tell if it's been in the pot too long. You can kind of see on that. I've seen big gnarly roots coming out of the bottom of the pot. You want to kind of check for some of that. If that's the case, it's probably been in the pot too long and the roots are probably girdling themselves in the pot. So,
which again is probably going to be okay, but there's going to be a lot more work on your end at planting time.
Yeah,
you're going to have to address that.
Yeah. And then speaking of pots, like what size pot are we dealing with here? So, you know, you find this nice tree, but is it in a 15-gallon container? Is it in a 3-gallon container? 5, 7, 10, you know?
Yeah, what can you
25
handle?
gallons. So what can you handle? What can your vehicle handle? Is it B&B? You know, a lot of these nurseries, don't be afraid to ask. A lot of them offer delivery services, and even some of them offer planting service.
Right,
like if it's a big tree and you're like, man, I really want this tree as an investment for my property, but I physically just can't A, haul it, or B, plant it. Talk with the nursery manager and try and find out if they have a planting service. If they do, get something set up. Usually the turnaround's pretty quick on that. If they don't, talk with them about some local people that, you know, landscape companies or whatever that would be able to help you with that.
Yeah, they're often in with somebody who they'll contract out for that reason.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, even if they aren't contracting, they have a name or a business card. They can say, hey, you know, like this person's fantastic. You know, we deal with them a lot. You know, yada yada. So
and when Matt's talking about the size of the pots, the gallons, you can buy a tree in a 1-gallon pot all the way up to probably retail like a 25-gallon pot.
Probably so.
And in between there's 3, 7, 5, or 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20, 25. You have to remember that when you go to plant that tree, and again, this is a different episode, but when you go to plant that tree, you need to make that hole at least 2 times wider than that pot.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you physically dig, you know, to get that tree in? So, you know, we found that some of the times the smaller ones, it's a better investment because it costs less and they'll catch up with the larger ones. So
yeah, the recovery on it's much quicker.
I think that 10 to 15, as far as like a homeowner goes, that 10 to 15 gallon pot range is really good as far as like, you don't have to put in too much work for digging the hole, and the tree's fairly large.
Yeah, a nice sized tree is still manageable for sure.
And if you aren't planning on getting delivery, remember what vehicle you've driven to the garden center, because another garden center story, and I'm sure you've seen this too. There was a guy in a Mazda Miata.
Oh God!
And he bought like a 15-gallon tree, and he just put the trunk into his the pot into his trunk, and the tip of the tree was just bouncing up off the ground as he drove away. Yeah. And it's like, that's not good.
No, that's not good.
Think this through. Maybe you've got someone you can borrow a truck from, a pickup truck, or, you know, maybe you've got an SUV and you can like leave the hatch open and let it hang out that way. But just, you know, think about what you Joe. You can't strap potted trunks to the potted. Why do I keep saying this? Potted trees to the top of the car like you can a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
So.
Oh man, I just have some funny like visuals in my head right now about all that.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do an episode about funny like horticulturist stories someday.
We should. Yeah. We would have to really spend some time compiling
some
those.
good ones.
Yeah. So some of the things to think about with going into a garden center is just having a plan. So like, you can go in there with no plan, but it'll make your life easier, and it'll make the sales associate's life easier at the garden center if you go in with the plan. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a full-on landscape plan all drawn out real nice on a piece of paper, but at least go in there knowing like, okay, I've got this 10-foot long by 3-foot wide flower bed that I want to put perennials in that gets pretty dry and is in full sun. Okay, that helps us out a lot in the garden center. Like, okay, here's where we can get started, you know. Or even having pictures of the area, pictures of flowers that you really like.
I loved it when customers would pull out their phones and show me photos of the spaces.
Yes.
That was very helpful.
It helps so much. So just knowing like the sun exposure, having some photos of the area that you're wanting to work on helps out so much. A lot of these garden centers offer landscape design services, whether that be for a relatively small fee compared to going to a full-blown landscape design company. Or even some of them will offer these like napkin, these like little 5 minute napkin landscape designs for free, where you can go in and they'll just draw something out real quick for you on a piece of paper, 5 or 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Usually very basic, but maybe that's all you're looking for is basic. But so go in with the plan, go in with photos, go in with some notes. Like I said, if you like echinaceas, write that down. Like, these are the flowers that I like. Will this work for my area? And those sales associates should be able to help you kind of get what you're looking for, or if it's not exactly what you're looking for, maybe it's a great alternative too.
Yeah.
So,
or if you want to do like all natives, make sure you say that. Make sure you say all natives, because again, there's non-natives being sold and they're fine. They're not invasive, but they're going to be recommended unless you specify, I just want natives. So as many details you can have, the better.
Yeah. So many times I get people that'll come in and it's like, I got this flower, but I want to completely redo. Okay, is it sun or shade? Well, I think it gets some morning sun, and it's just like, or maybe it just gets afternoon. I'm not real sure, and it's just like, okay, well, I have no idea where I need to go with this.
Trust me, I know.
So
I know what you're saying.
So just save yourself and the garden center some time and come in there with a plan, ready to go. So,
and another thing to keep in mind is also when you're buying things, this is going back to the trees that might be an investment. Ask what their warranty is.
Okay.
On things, right? I don't know what Dutch Mills is, but I know the garden center I worked at had a 1-year warranty on woodies, and it's like, it's totally in your best interest as the customer to know that. Because 90% of the time when the customer brings something dead back, it's something the customer did wrong.
Yeah.
But they're still going to honor the warranty. So
I think ours is 6 months and 50%. So we'll cover the half the cost of the plant for up to 6 months.
Okay.
But we do a really good job of really trying to educate the consumer.
And that's important. Going
out like, hey, like this is how you plant it. Here's the best steps to take to make sure that you're going to succeed, because we don't want to resell the same plant to the person as a replacement. You know what I mean? Like, we want them to buy that plant and have it do really, really well, and then say, man, like those plants that we bought at Dutch Mill did fantastic. I'm going to go back there and buy another plant. And then we also tell people, like, if this thing starts, if you have any questions, like a month from now or 2 months from now, like, oh, it's not looking all that great, like, let us know, so that whether that be pictures, if you're close, like, let us stop out and take a peek at
troubleshoot.
And help you troubleshoot this thing. Maybe it's getting a little too much water. Maybe it's not getting enough water. Maybe you're not maybe your watering techniques aren't right. Maybe it's planted too deep. So there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different variables. And be sure and ask, like, when you're in there, if you're unsure about planting any of this stuff, proper planting techniques, or whether you need soil amendments or anything like that, like, be sure and ask a sales associate or find the garden center manager. And don't be afraid to ask those questions, because we all love talking plants, and we want to make sure that you're going to succeed in planting this stuff. So
exactly,
it's not annoying to us. It's not an inconvenience. It's like, that's what we're there for sure. So,
and I remember working at the garden center, we carried a lot of azaleas and rhododendrons, which is something that we can't really grow here unless you amend the soil. And I would always warn people of that when they were picking them up, like, that's fine, and this wasn't like a sales tack. This was like, you're going to need to get this product too, and apply it based on what the label says, or else that's going to die.
Yeah.
So, just a quick plug here for the small family-owned places. The big box stores aren't going to do that for you.
No.
They're not going to tell you that.
No, and that's the other thing too. Like, if you want to go in a big box store, then by all means go in there. You're probably going to find some plants that look nice at a reasonable price, but I'm just here to tell you, like, the plants that you find there are not going to be the quality that you're going to find at the family-owned and operated garden centers in your local towns. the people that like live and die plants, the people that work in Home Depot and Lowe's, they might love plants or enjoy plants, but they don't live and die plants, and these people that are running these garden centers, these independent ones, like that's their livelihood. So
yeah.
they are selling you the absolute best quality plant that they have, to sell. So,
and oftentimes at these more local places, they're getting that stuff from growers who are also local. So I know that when we go into a garden center, we know all the labels and pots and stuff.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, that came from this place down the road, and that came from the other place down the road.
Yep.
That's who grew that. Or if you go into the big box store, it's like, well, that probably came from Georgia
or Oregon,
Yeah.
or wherever. Yeah.
So, and again, there's nothing wrong with that if you really know what you're looking at and looking for. But if you're real green on this topic, if you will, the small family owned garden centers are going to help you out a lot, set you up for success a lot more.
100%. And then also when you're in garden centers, if you have this plan and you've got, like say there's this tree you really want, it's a red bud, and it's like, man, I really want that as like an ornamental tree in my landscape, but the garden center doesn't have it. Just ask if it's on an upcoming shipment or if it's something that can be special ordered. So
yeah, because those garden centers are getting truckfuls daily.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we get tree and shrub stuff in, annuals, vegetables, things like that. I mean, we're growing a lot of our own stuff, so we're not getting the number of trucks as some garden centers do. But
I know what the one I worked at was when I worked in Dublin during the day, and then I would go there in the evenings, and every single day there would be just like more stuff
that you got to put out.
It was already out because like I missed that whole part. Luckily,
lucky you.
They were like, "Oh, we had to unload all the trucks," and I'm like, "Thank goodness I didn't have to do that part." But it was just like these trucks are coming in constantly, bringing in new material, so you never know what's going to be there the next day. So ask.
Yeah, ask, because availabilities change constantly on the wholesale and retail side. So. So just ask if there's something you're looking for or you're unsure about. Just ask. So we're all plant people, and we love talking plants and helping you out. So cool.
Yeah, as a former garden center employee, my favorite part was when a customer would come to me with like a puzzle.
Yeah,
like, hey, I really like pink flowers. I've got this like really dry, sunny spot, and yada yada. And that was like helping them figure out exactly what they needed. That was the best part. That was way better than like making straight lines with shrubs and watering. That's what we want. That's what they want to do when you come in, is talk to you about plants.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope that there's a lot of you listening that are probably like, oh, I already knew all of this stuff, and that's fine. Maybe it's just a refresher for you, but hopefully there's some of you that are like Tim said, a little green on the garden center side of things, and hopefully some of this stuff that we're talking about can help you this spring as you find your way into a garden center. If you're getting ready to completely overhaul the landscape at your house, or maybe you're just wanting to freshen the area up, hopefully some of what we talked about can help you with that. So cool. What else you got, Timmy?
Cool.
Anything else?
Just wanted to say happy birthday to you again.
Thank you.
I just want everyone listening to know that it's your birthday.
It is my birthday.
I mean, I know you don't embrace your birthday, but I'm gonna just say happy birthday over and over.
Thank you.
So you have no choice.
I don't get super excited about my birthday anymore. You're right. I'm 42. I'm not 21. So my niece turned 21 yesterday, which is cool.
Well,
so yeah, Sophie. So cool. All right, peeps. Well, I think that wraps it up for this week. We'll be back here next week for another episode. Not sure what it's going to be about yet. We'll brainstorm those ideas, but
we sure will. We'll sure be back.
It's getting ready to be a busy season, so we're gonna pack in some useful information for you in the next coming episodes, and we're gonna hit up, maybe this summer we can hit up a funny hort story episode.
I want to do a funny hort story, and I want to do funny plant name episode, but I think that's like middle of the summer, not much going on.
When things are kind of, it's just like the status quo of watering. Yeah.
Or like garden misnomers.
Yeah. Perfect. Love it. All right, peeps. Well, that's it for us. I am Matt, and he is Timmy Tulips Fleischer.
Timmy Tulips, I love you harder.
+2.
Bye-bye.
Bye.